What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Mafia podcast. I am your host, Jerry, aka Action Boss, and I'm here with my co host, Jordan, Dr. Fantasy, and our other co host, Zach Myers, aka Apex. What's going on today, boys?
Going pretty good. How are you doing?
All right, everybody at the same time. Perfect. Today, last week
Great show.
last week we went over our running backs 21 to 30. And I'll recap. In 30th, we had Philip Lindsay. 29th, DeAndre Swift. 28th, Jordan Howard. 27th, Kareem Hunt. 26th, Raheem Mostert. 25th, David Montgomery. 24th, Devin Singletary. 23rd, Mark Ingram. 22nd, Melvin Gordon. And 21, James Conner. Today we are doing the next 10, 11 through 20. All right, so we will start with you, Dr. Fantasy. We'll talk a little bit about, as you're taking a big drink of water. Jonathan Taylor comes in at number 20. He's our first rookie counting backwards, or he's our second rookie. We had DeAndre Swift at number 29. So he's our second rookie counting backwards. It's unsure if he's even the starter there in Indianapolis. I'd assume probably not right out of the gate. But why does he come in at number 20 for us here?
Well, sneak preview, he is the second rookie in this episode. But, I'm not a fan of Jonathan Taylor, specifically in redraft leagues. I do think the Colts are going to be fairly run-heavy. They were fourth in rushing attempts last year, which went under the radar, I would say. But my biggest issue with Jonathan Taylor is his ADP right now is 48th, and it's rising fast. I mean, I saw the ADP on Fantasy Pros being 48th, but in a lot of mocks that I'm doing, I've seen him slowly slip into the third round, early fourth, so I think that's just going to continue to rise, and that's just bizarre to me. And as much as people want to rule out Marlon Mack, I mean, this is a guy that's shown a lot of promise and ability in the past. It's different for me, with Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay. Not that Philip Lindsay's not talented, but I think Marlon Mack's a starting running back in this league. So as much as Jonathan Taylor is much more talented, and by week 8, 9, 10, he'll take over that backfield, I don't trust him enough to draft him in that spot. When you draft him there, I mean, you're confident that he's going to be your RB2. And I mean, I'm not confident he's going to be an RB2 for the first half of the season. So by the time he takes over the touches, you may be 0-8 at that point. So I don't trust him at that ADP. One of the things that he does have in his advantage, they have a very strong offensive line. But another guy I didn't even mention is Nyheim Hines. I think he's going to be very involved in the passing game. As much as, once again, Jonathan Taylor is way more talented than these guys, but these are talented running backs that are going to take a few touches away from him, and I really hate his ADP.
Apex, where did you have him in your rankings, and do you agree with him being at 20 here?
I probably had him lower in my rankings. I don't have him up right now, but yeah, I'd agree with not liking this spot based on his ADP. As Doctor said, it is going up. He is going, top of the fourth round, and with everything kind of going on, the preseason is basically canceled at this point. We're just going to have training camp and then get right into the season. I just don't think that there's going to be enough time for him to acclimate to the NFL game and NFL speed and be able to take those touches right out of the gate. I think, like Doctor said, we're going to have to be waiting until later into the season for him to have a prominent role. And I just don't think you can use your fourth round pick on a guy that you're going to be waiting on for at least half the year. I mean, that's pretty equivalent to drafting Kareem Hunt in the fourth round last season, as we knew he was going to be out for 8 weeks. So he's still going to be on the field for you, and he could definitely break out beforehand with an injury or something like that. But it's not likely that we see any kind of running back have a great role out of the start of the season.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with both of you guys. I mean, unless there's like a Corona injury or I don't want to call it injury, but unless there's like a player,
is that the right term, Corona?
Unless there's a player that's out with Corona or an actual injury, then I don't see Jonathan Taylor doing much at the first half of the season. He's definitely going to have to work himself in there. Hines definitely brought up a good name there. Hines is an excellent pass catcher out of the backfield. He's started a few games in this league before too. Obviously, we have Marlon Mack, who's an excellent running back. It's just It's tough. I mean, if this was just a regular off season and we're inching closer to the season, and maybe something happens where Marlon Mack is dealt or Hines is cut because they need to get down to 53, it will make a lot more sense. But right now, they got three viable running backs there. Hopefully, one can take the lead. Hopefully, I mean, maybe it is Jonathan Taylor. Definitely, I mean, in this spot for a dynasty league, that's good. I mean, it might be even low for a dynasty league. He should be higher in dynasty, but for a redraft league, 20th for a rookie, even as good as Jonathan Taylor, is a little too high. But I mean, that's where the consensus comes in. We had about 6 or 7 guys doing these rankings, and a couple of them had Jonathan Taylor even a little higher. So that's why he comes in at 20. So coming in at 19 is another guy seeing or joining a new team this year, and that's David Johnson going from the Arizona Cardinals to the Houston Texans. And Apex, will start with you here.
All right. I know we've talked about the kind of situation David Johnson finds him in, where there's a lot of vacated targets because what they used to give up for him was basically, one of the top receivers in the league. So for the passing work, there's 150 plus targets that are going to be available that are going to need to be spread out between the guys that they brought in or already had, as well as David Johnson that they acquired in that trade. So his passing volume is going to be up in the air. I feel like he's going to be, utilized in that role as he has been over the past several seasons. Not exactly last year as he was battling some injuries, but for David Johnson in 2020, there's going to be some passing opportunity that he's going to be able to take advantage of. And then from there, it just comes down to how many touchdowns he can get in this offense, how many is going to be left over for him from Watson throwing the ball as well as running the ball. So it's just going to be, for me, David Johnson, 19. He's a decent back to take a shot on. He definitely has the talent to finish as the 19th back or even higher, potentially top 10 as we've seen. But a lot of moving parts, and it's gonna, with the offseason situation we've talked about it's going to be a little bit difficult for him to find his role, out of the gate. So this could be another guy that's a little bit sluggish, in the first parts of the season until we see him kind of settle into the role and settle into how many targets and carries that he's going to get throughout the rest of the year.
Doc, I feel every time we bring up David Johnson, we always bring up the one same point, so I'm going to let you take it this time.
No, I'm not going to take it. I could never do that to you. But let me break this down a little bit. So, I mean, a lot of people don't realize how good he was at the beginning of last season. So, week by week here. Week number 1, he was RB5. Week 2, RB37. Not great. Week 3, RB9. Week 4, RB10. Week 5, RB12. Week 6, RB3, and then he got injured. So in 5 of those 6 games, he was an RB1 still. And a lot of people say, he stunk last year. I mean, once he came back, he absolutely did. But at that point, Kenyon Drake pretty much took over that backfield, and there was no looking back at that point. And really, at that point, you kind of get a sense. I mean, hindsight's 2020. They probably knew they were going to deal him at that point. When Kenyon Drake really started to catch on, David Johnson has the pretty sizable contract. There's really no need to keep him at that point. So, I mean, this is a guy that was a surefire RB1 almost every single week when he was healthy. So currently his ADP is 38th off the board, 20th running back off the board. So right around where we have him. But I really believe that this is a league-winning pick right here. And I know a lot of people are going to be taking him as their RB2. But for me, in the way that I draft, I've taken him as my flex. And this is a guy I really believe if he stays healthy the entire season. And I know we don't like to say that, but that's a reality with a lot of these guys. If he's on the field for 16 games this year, I think that he'll be an RB1. I mean, he's proven that he can do it. And who's competing with touches? Duke Johnson? I mean, I love Duke Johnson. I think he's a very versatile running back. But if you tell me that Duke Johnson is going to take away touches for David Johnson, I'm going to mute you immediately. Because that's a crazy thing to say. I mean, David Johnson's been an all-pro running back. So as much as I don't trust his injury, if he's healthy and on the field, this is a guy, I'm taking a risk on him. When you start looking at these RB2s, if you're making me choose between Gurley, Bell, David Johnson, Jonathan Taylor, some of these other guys, I'm taking the chance on David Johnson all day.
Yeah, just feeding off what both you guys said. Obviously, he still has something left in the tank from the way that he played at the beginning of last year. His passing numbers have been really good for, especially for the running back position. He's had 80 catches in one season. He's had 50 catches in one season. He gets into the end zone through the air every single year, except for the year that he missed pretty much every game, except for starting the first game of the season. He's had three. Well, he's had 4 touchdowns in 3 of the years, and then 3 receiving touchdowns in the other. These are all receiving touchdowns. So he gets into the end zone through the air, four receiving touchdowns in 3 of the seasons, and 3 in the other. Um, Also, Houston, just off the top of my head, and I can't even think of who it is right now, and I guess that's a good thing for David Johnson. I don't even know who their starting tight end is, or if they even have someone that you're willing to draft. So all the dump offs, all the dink and dunks, all the short slants over the middle coming out of the backfield, that's going to be from David Johnson. That's going to be where Deshaun Watson is running for his life, trying to get away from defenders because that offensive line still isn't the best yet. That's where he's going to be going to. He's going to be going to David Johnson because he knows that he's reliable with the football. And then,
So what you're saying is you don't have faith in Darren Fells, Jordan Thomas, or Jordan Akins.
don't have faith in any of them. They should just line David Johnson up at tight end.
Bold.
But yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to get the work. You didn't actually steal the point, so I'll say it. Bill O'Brien, he gave up DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson. I mean, so you know that he's going to use him. He's definitely going to use him in that offense. He's going to find places to put him on the field. I mean, you could even see Duke and David on the field at the same time, split running backs out of the backfield. Both of them could catch the ball. David's the better runner, but both of them could catch the ball. PPR leagues, he's going to be very effective. We hate to use the healthy term. We hate to say if they stay healthy, but I mean, if he stays healthy, 16 games, I mean, he could be a legit RB1 by the end of the season. Next up, we got Le'Veon Bell. Just going back and forth. I know this is your former running back, Apex, but we're going to start here with Doc here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lev Bell is a super safe pick. I mean, I've said this a few times, but he's the kind of guy, if you're looking for RB1 upside, and I mean, this might seem crazy to say about Lev Bell, who was a top 10 back every single season with the Steelers, almost like clockwork. So I just don't think he has it with the Jets. I've said the black hole that is Adam Gase several times. I don't need to beat that dead horse, but I don't trust that offense. They did improve the offensive line. I don't know if they've improved it enough where I'm confident in it. I mean, this was the worst offensive line in football last year, and you could see it in his numbers. I mean, he averaged 3.2 yards a carry. That's embarrassing. And a lot of that has to do with that offensive line. But in the end, he was RB16 last year with that poor efficiency. He had a ton of volume. When you look at his consistency, I mean, he's one of the most consistent backs last year. He only had 2 games where he was below 10 PPR points, and they were in back-to-back games against New England and Jacksonville. So he was very consistent the entire year. So if you're looking for a guy that's consistent, yeah, would I want to draft him necessarily? Not really, but if you're looking for a guy with kind of low upside to get you 10 points every single week, I think that's what he's going to be at this point.
Apex, we talked about your current running back last show. Now let's talk about your former running back. What's your thoughts on Bell?
All right. Well, it feels like we're talking in like 2016 or 2017, basically, with all these former, stud players, around here in the lower teens. But that's the reality. And you said, Doc, you didn't want to beat the dead horse of Adam Gase, but I like to because it's fun. Adam Gase is a terrible coach, and that's it. We're done. Okay.
Maybe he is the dead horse, Adam Gase.
But the problem with Le'Veon Bell, I think, a new offense last season, it was hard for him to get acclimated, as well as he didn't have his young, new quarterback for several games. Sam Darnold was out with mono, and whether that had a big effect on Le'Veon Bell's production, who knows? But we're going to see it this year, presumably that they're going to both be healthy. So we're going to see if Le'Veon Bell is able to take, the threat of the young quarterback and be more positive with the carries that he had. He had very low rushing totals. It was about 750, and definitely a slap to his touchdowns. He probably had about 4 or 5. I believe it was 4. But I'm rising on him this year. We've kind of talked about him the last several weeks or so, and have compared him directly to James Conner in Pittsburgh now. But for Le'Veon Bell this year, he offers the passing work, just as we've said for David Johnson. He's offered very agile, very hesitant in his running style, patient. He's probably, talent wise, he's up there among the top 10. He's still a very good back, and I just think if the Jets can overall as a whole kind of get things together, even though they have Adam Gase, Le'Veon Bell could have a solid season, be pretty consistent back for you in the RB2 spot.
All right, so question for both of you. We'll Doc answer first, just so we're not talking at the same time. But his ADP, Le'Veon Bell, he is just naming the running backs he's going around. We've pretty much talked about all of them except for one so far. So they're obviously lower on our consensus list because we're counting down backwards. Who are you taking out of these guys? So you got Le'Veon Bell, you got David Johnson, who we just talked about, Melvin Gordon, who we talked about last episode, and James Conner, who we also talked about last episode. The only other one that we haven't talked about yet, and he's coming up in a couple picks, is Chris Carson. So we'll throw those 5 names out there. You're picking where Le'Veon Bell's going, which looks like it's end of the 3rd round, beginning of the 4th. So you're picking at the turn. You already got a solid running back, solid wide receiver. You're looking for your RB2. Who are you taking?
I mean, for me, it's still David Johnson. I mean, I just talked about all the points and reasons why I love him. So I'd take him over Bell, Gordon, Carson. He's ahead of all those guys for me. If I had to rank a second, I'd probably have Melvin Gordon. I'm starting to not jump on that bandwagon, but the more that I research him and that offense, I like him. And he's been a consistent top 10 back as well, and Philip Lindsay doesn't scare me. So I'd take those 2 guys ahead of him.
Yeah, yet again, like I said, we're talking like we're in 2017 basically. But, with all those options, I do like Connor. I got to bring up his name being the hometown player. I am a little bit rising on Gordon as well. I feel like the last episode that we discussed made a lot of good points to Gordon, and I kind of went back and looked him over and kind of bumped him up in my mind a little bit. As far as this question, I got to be honest, I'm probably taking Le'Veon Bell, or just hoping that he's the guy that I get in that ADP spot on the turn there in the 4th, 3rd, 4th turn. So I just got to be honest, I'm probably taking Bell over them. I do like Carson. A lot of these guys carry the same kind of question or statement, I should say. If they stay healthy, they're going to be a really good back, and I feel like that's the same for all of them. At this point, right now, I'm leaning Bell, but a lot of good options, and they're all kind of going around in this spot. So, definitely good ones to jump on for your RB2.
All right, so we're going to stay in the past here, but I think we're going to move up a year or two, and now we're going to talk about Jordan's former running back from his favorite team, but we're going to start with you, Apex. That's Todd Gurley.
All right, well, the injury concern is probably what has Todd Gurley down here at 17 for us. Just not knowing the status of his knee, as well as seeing how he was used in this last year once it was kind of known that they were monitoring it and kind of going to scale back his touches. He was kind of bad this season, and the only thing that really saved him, in my mind, I was a Gurley owner, is the amount of touchdowns that he got. But it just the usage in the passing game, the usage in the running game, we just did not see the same Todd Gurley that won the MVP and was just absolutely amazing for the previous years. It's just, going into the new team here, same kind of questions that we're going to be asking, what kind of usage is going to be available. The Falcons definitely not as run heavy as the Rams were. Definitely don't have as good offensive line, but they seem to have better passing weapons, and they have a better thrower in Matt Ryan compared to Goff. So, out of the backfield, maybe he could offer some value there, but for me, it's the amount of carries that he's going to be able to get. If they're going to just say, we know you're hurt, just go do what you can for us, or if they're going to say, we know you're hurt, let's scale it back a little bit so that you're available for this season. So, with the uncertainty of that, as well as how every player is going to be with COVID and things like that, it'll be interesting to see how much he'll get. Same as we've said for these other guys, based on this new pass heavy offense that he's going to be in Atlanta.
Doc?
Well, let me first say something kind of crazy.
Well, move your head out of the way first. You got the jersey right behind you.
Yeah.
Let's give a little recognition to that.
Door there. But I think that this is a 1-year deal with Atlanta. I legitimately think that this could be the last year that Todd Gurley ever starts. And that sounds insane to say out loud, but I really think that injuries could derail him to that point. And it's not as crazy as you think. I mean, we've seen running backs a lot when I started playing fantasy. Sean Alexander, Clinton Portis. These guys were top 5 running backs, and then all of a sudden they were retired the next season. So, I mean, this is a legitimate thing that happened. So I really fear that for Todd Gurley, and he has injuries he's going to have to deal with for the rest of his life. But, I mean, let's start with the positives, I suppose. Well, that's not really positive, but let me go into some positives, I suppose. I mean, you already mentioned it. He's going to get the red zone work. That's a positive. He had 14 total touchdowns last year. This is going to be a very potent offense, and he'll, I think he's a great goal line back. I still think that he'll have at least 10 or so touchdowns right in that range. I mean, overall, this is a great offense. He doesn't really have anyone to compete with touches for. Ito Smith, Brian Hill, Codry Olison, none of those guys really worry me. So, I mean, Todd Gurley's the man in Atlanta. I mean, I think they're the perfect spot for Travis Etienne next year, but that's a whole other conversation. But, so, I mean, he does have opportunity. No one really concerns you, but I mean, I just think that injury is going to derail him. I think he's done. His ADP to me is way too high right now. He's the 15th back off the board. When you look at his season last year, he had the 17th most points per game. And I really think that's his ceiling at this point. So to take him even higher than he was last year, I think people have that much confidence in the Atlanta offense, which I understand to a certain extent, but I don't expect him to even overly be involved in the passing game, honestly. He had 31 receptions last year, so fairly, reasonable, but he had 9 drops on 31. 9, that's significant. He led all running backs by quite a hefty margin, so he's not even really the receiving back that he was a few years ago, so I don't expect him to be overly used there. And what's really depressing is when you look at all of his metrics, I mean, they're sad when you compare him to a few years ago. And a lot of them, yards per touch, breakaway runs, top-end speed, evaded tackles, all things. He was elusive, and to me, he was the best running back in the NFL during that almost MVP campaign season. He should have won MVP, but he didn't. But he was one of the most elusive backs, great breakaway speed. He broke tackles. I mean, he did everything you wanted in a running back. And when you look at it over the pass of last year and the end of the year prior, he doesn't do any of that anymore. So people that are expecting top 10 Gurley aren't going to get it. But he's going to have volume. He'll score touchdowns. If you're in a non-PPR league, he's more of a buy for me based on the touchdown potential. But I just don't see much upside with a Gurley pick here.
Yeah, it's I'm kind of on the fence about him too. It's really hard for me to kind of put a figure on it, put a number on it where I think he's going to end up. Obviously, I think he's going to a much better offense, and this is coming off of a team 2 years ago that went to the Super Bowl and they just rolled over teams in the regular season and kind of just put up a stinker in the Super Bowl. And last year the whole offense as a whole was fairly healthy. Cooper Kupp missed, I think, 2 games. I think Woods missed 1 or 2 games. Cooks missed 1 or 2 games. So, I mean, for the most part, aside from that was handful of games, they had the whole offense that was healthy, and they didn't do much. But now Gurley's coming over to a much better offense and actually a much worse defense too. So he's going to get his opportunities to catch the ball out of the backfield. He's going to get his opportunities. You can't just focus on the run game there in Atlanta because you have to stop Julio Jones. You have to stop Calvin Ridley. Matt Ryan really isn't a threat running the ball, so those touches aren't really going to be taken away from him. But I don't know. I mean, I would trust him. I would take him maybe around the 4th, 5th round in a redraft league and hopefully get what I can out of him the first 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of the season before he starts to wear down. But I do agree with you, Doc. I think that this is going to be his last year starting. He might be a role player on some other teams. He could be like for example, here in Buffalo, he could be somebody like a Zach Moss role where Singletary's doing a lot of the load, and then Gurley comes in and pounds it in. I mean, that could be. I'm sure there's teams out there that could use somebody like that, and that could be Gurley by 2021. Next up is a guy that we kind of just mentioned his name when we were talking about Le'Veon Bell, and that's Chris Carson. Doc, it's up to you first.
So Carson right now is the 19th running back off the board, 34th overall. So once again, pretty close to where we have him ranked. We have him ranked a little higher. You know, and I feel like I'm putting myself to sleep, but with a lot of these running backs, it comes down to them staying on the field. And I mean, it's the same thing with Chris, and I hate using that point, but Chris Carson has always been one of those guys for me, and I don't know if it was because he was what was he, undrafted or a 7th-round pick? I think 7th-round pick. So, I mean, coming into the league, he has a chip on his shoulder, and I think from the very beginning, we're like, I mean, we don't. Every year I say I don't want Chris Carson. I'm like, I don't want that guy. He's not that good. And then every year he's a top 15 back. Every single year. It's like clockwork the past 3 years. So it's once again one of those things. I don't have a lot to say about him. It's a very run-heavy offense. They're usually top 5 in rush attempts. He gets his volume. He's their goal line back. They have Carlos Hyde. I think that's an underrated signing. He had an underrated season in Houston last year. Rashad Penny has done absolutely nothing, and he's probably going to start on the PUP list to begin the year. But, I mean, in this spot, if you're looking for, once again, a reliable RB2, and I would actually say, compared to these other guys we've said, Chris Carson actually has some upside based on the offense that he's in. He has the red zone carries. He is still relatively young. I mean, he's still only 25 years old. So, I mean, I'm not writing Chris Carson off. His injuries aren't as significant as Gurley, for example, but he's in a good offense. He's always produced, and, I mean, I think he's a solid RB2.
Apex, what are your thoughts on Chris Carson?
All right. Well, you asked about the Bell and Carson, kind of which would you have? And I chose Bell it simply because we're not sure if Carson's going to play the entire year based on his running style. He seems to just always have a knack for getting some nagging injuries and season-ending injuries the past few years. And, so to avoid the risk, I chose Bell. But if you could guarantee me that Carson's going to play the year, I would absolutely take Chris Carson. I think it's spoiler alert, the Seahawks offense is a little bit better than the Jets offense. So, Doc touched on it. He's the main guy. We have Rashard Penny that has kind of been there, also dealt with some injuries, but Carson's been the short yardage guy, the goal line guy. He's worked out of the backfield, so he's given you everything that you want in a started running back, except stay healthy all year. So that's the biggest thing for Chris Carson. And if we can sit here and guarantee you that he's going to play, we're probably going to move him up in our rankings from 16 here. But, the injury risk is there, and that's why he is down this low. Seahawks offense as a whole, I really like them. I really like how Russell Wilson distributes the ball, as well as, they use every different piece there from Lockett to Metcalf to, even Disley and Hollister a little bit last season. And Chris Carson, he's definitely involved in the passing game. He's caught a couple of receiving touchdowns. He's gotten the goal line work, as I've said. So just all of the volume and the usage is there for Chris Carson. But, the fantasy community is just sitting here and kind of hoping that he can just stay healthy because, having another repeat of our guy and Carson here lose games, be injured and things like that, it's just going to be pretty sad yet again.
Yeah, and before you wrap it up, Jerry, I mean, we're kind of dancing around this concept, but a lot of drafting is about weighing risk and reward. And I mean, part of injury concern is weighing is the risk worth their ADP. So I think that's what it comes down to with Carson is, are his injury concerns worth taking him as your second running back? And it's one of the reasons why I never deploy a 0 running back system. I mean, you're looking at this range of having Gurley and Chris Carson as your 2 running backs. I mean, you could be in a situation where your top 2 running backs aren't playing by week 5, and that's a reality.
Yeah, definitely. That's I mean, he's definitely a good running back. He's in a great offense. He's in probably one of the better offenses that we've discussed so far today. aside from maybe Jonathan Taylor's offense, but I think he's got better weapons on the outside, working with them, and one of the better quarterbacks in the league with Russell Wilson. But as you mentioned, Doc, they brought in Carlos Hyde. They got Rashad Penny, and he's a former first round pick. So when he does come back, he's going to get some time in there. And then they also have DJ Dallas, who they drafted this year too. So that backfield is loaded. They also brought in Greg Olson from the Panthers, so adding on to the tight ends that Apex mentioned, he's going to get some work too. So even though Carson really isn't the pass catching back that we would like him to be, and that a lot of these other running backs are, there's some targets going Olsen's way too. So they got a lot. They got a lot on that offense, but for the most part, beginning of the season is going to be Chris Carson until Carlos Hyde gets worked in, until DJ Dallas, if he's activated, gets worked in, until Rashad Penny comes back. So he could be a good start of the season running back. It's just how much do you want to pay for him and have the risk of him not being there later on. Next up, we got our third rookie that we're going to discuss. I think this is our highest rookie that we have. This is our last rookie that we're going to talk about. Yeah, this is our last rookie that we're going to talk about in this series. So last one today, and then we don't have any rookies next week when we go over the top 10. And that is Patrick Mahomes' new weapon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The first rookie running back drafted in the draft this year, taken in the first round. So if he stays, now he hasn't really had any injury issues, but I'm just saying this just in reference. If he stays healthy for his years there, he's got the 5th-year option now that he was taken in the first round of the draft, which is going to help a lot because Mahomes just signed for $500 billion. So they need all the less expensive guys that they can get. So Apex, what's your thoughts on Helaire this year?
All right, I knew I'd have to kick this one off, and I've beat the drum ever since I started here. Helaire was actually the first article that I wanted to write about because I felt so strongly about him being too high in the draft, and a lot of other factors will contribute that, the whole COVID situation, but it comes down for me. Out of the gate, he's already being drafted above Carson and Bell and these guys that we've talked about, and so being drafted at that spot, you're taking him at the apex, so to say, of where you're gonna the production that you're gonna get. So you're expecting him to come out rookie season and put up 1,500 yards and 10 plus touchdowns and return that value, and I just don't think that that's going to happen or come anywhere close in his rookie season. So for me, I would, if these were my rankings, I would take him and just slide him all the way back down to the mid-20s because that's where I'd be comfortable drafting him. I don't think he's going to return you value as the top 15 running back, and he's going as the 14th off the board, and I just feel like, it feels like that's gone down a little bit, but I still see people taking him in the middle of the second round and just saying, he's going to be fantastic. And I'm not knocking him at all. I absolutely love the guy, and he's a great fit for this offense. And, I agree if you're in a dynasty league, you're going to have to pay up to get him because he's probably going in the back of the first in a dynasty league. But he is the biggest example of avoiding risk that I can find among the running backs. I'm not going to take him at the top 15 spot here because he's just not going to get that. And that's my firm belief. He's not going to have enough volume, enough time to be acclimated with the system to go around. And he's dealing with, a top 3 receiver in Tyreek Hill. He's dealing with the number 1 tight end in Travis Kelce. And he's dealing with some pretty good pieces, after that is with Damian Williams and Sammy Watkins and Mecole Hardman. So if all those guys are ahead of him, he comes in as the 6th target for Mahomes, and that might be better than the 6th target for any other quarterback, but it's just not something that I'm going to be confident with that he can be an every week starter for my team. So I am passing 1,000% on Helaire this season.
Jordan, Doc, before you get into him, I need you to say his nickname.
The Fresh Prince of Helaire?
Yes.
I mean, you know how much I love Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, we talked about it pre-draft where he was my favorite running back coming in, and I mean, I was shocked he went as the first running back off the board, but I was really happy to see it. I mean, he's the perfect fit for this offense, but I mean, whatever drugs the people are smoking that take Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like I want some, or maybe I don't, but I mean,
Oh
they're on
man.
some. It's insane. I mean, it is absolutely insane. Not only is he the 14th running back off the board, as Apex mentioned, I mean, 27th overall. And yeah, I mean, I've done some mocks where he's 23rd, 24th, in that range off the board. I mean, I don't know what people are thinking, honestly. I mean, you're looking at a guy you're guaranteeing to be. I mean, when you're taking him in that spot, you want to see a guy you're guaranteeing to have a ton of volume. And in that offense, I just can't say that, right? And I think long term, you absolutely will see it. And to me, this is a perfect example of people reading too much into coach speak. Andy Reid said probably a month or so ago now that he was his next Brian Westbrook, and now people are fangirling over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I think Brian Westbrook is a great comparison. And I think within 2 to 3 years, we'll see Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a top 10 back for many seasons to come. But I just can't guarantee that consistent volume in year one, especially with all the question marks with COVID. And I hate talking about that more than anything in the world, but that's a reality that we live in right now. And I'm a little sad that Apex didn't bring up Damian Williams because I really wanted to talk about how much I hate Damian Williams, but that's okay. I mean, overall, though, I've just said, I mean, if you have that much confidence in Damian Williams, the Chiefs have a lot of defensive needs. I mean, their defense is nowhere near refined. So the fact they went out of their way to spend a first-round pick on a running back, to me, says all you, and they can say publicly whatever they want to about Damian Williams, but you said what you thought was on your mind when you drafted a running back in the first round.
Yeah, he's another one that's it's a tricky situation. Like you want any piece of that Chiefs offense that you can get, but you don't want to overload it. You don't want to go and pick Travis Kelce in the second round and then on the turn take Clyde Edwards-Helaire too, and then you're kind of handcuffing yourself to a running back and receiver from the same team. Even though in some cases it may work, but it's if he's on the field and he's getting the volume, then that's definitely it's perfect. I mean, you're going to get some production out of him. He comes from another high-powered offense and from LSU. Really, a lot of comparisons that you can make between the two teams. Good quarterback, pair of good wide receivers. But with all that being said, there's so many targets on that team. Apex kind of mentioned all of them, so I'm not going to repeat what he said. But I mean, somebody's going to be running the ball though. And it's just you're taking that chance, at least for the first half of the season. You're taking that chance that it's going to be him. You might get a couple 8-10 point games out of him because they're splitting carries between them all, and then all of a sudden Clyde runs away with the job, and towards the back end of the season you got yourself a pick that was definitely worth it. But do you really want to wait on that? Do you want to risk going 4-4, 3-5 at the first half of your season because you wanted to get the top rookie running back in the draft? I mean, it's definitely not worth it to me, but in a keeper league, if you could keep one player, two players next year, you could take them in a dynasty league. Obviously, in a rookie draft, he's going as like the first, second overall pick there. But in a redraft league, no keepers, it's a tough spot.
Yeah,
Next up,
I would just wanted
sorry.
I wanted to add one more point. If you're sitting here and you're like, oh, I like him too, but I echo the thoughts of Doctor and Apex and Action Boss here that he's too high. Trade for him. Just wait until week 5 or 6 when he's kind of had the middle of the pack road and maybe getting a couple touches a game, and the owner that took him at this spot is like, man, I didn't get what I want. Go ahead and trade for him. Maybe take the Gurley that you waited on, or the Bell that you waited on that kind of started better than Hilaire did, and go try to trade one of those guys for Hilaire, and then be in a great seat at the second half of the year. So that's my parting advice for Hilaire. If you really want him that bad, try to see if you can get him midseason in a trade.
Excellent point. Next up here, we got Leonard Fournette, one of the few bright spots on that Jaguars offense. DJ Chark's the other one. Doc, we're going to start here with you.
I'm very offended that you don't have more faith in the Jaguars' offense.
Oh, sorry. Forgot about Tyler Eifert.
Oh, there you go. That's much better. But yeah, I mean, Leonard Fournette, I think, is one of the most disrespected running backs this draft season. I mean, I've taken him as my flex a few times. I've gone 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds, and Fournette's my third back. I mean, to me, that's insanity. I mean, based on ADPs, that's not common. He's a 16th back off the board, 28th overall. So, you know, you don't always get that opportunity. But there's a lot of people who just don't want to touch anybody from the Jaguars offense because they're the Jaguars. And he finished as RB7 last year, which you know is a top 10 back, and he had a fantastic year last year. He really dominated the touches in that backfield. He had 91%, which was second in the NFL among all running backs. So I mean, he dominated the touches, fourth most red zone touches. But interestingly enough, he only had 3 touchdowns. And that's one of the reasons that I still really like him. As much as he had 100 targets last year, and I don't think that's going to happen again. 76 receptions. I mean, I think that'll be an outlier in Leonard Fournette's career. But even if he has, you know, we'll say 40, even 40 less receptions, I think he'll have enough touchdowns to make up for that. He just, based on how terrible their line was and how terrible that offense was, he just wasn't getting the touchdowns that he should have been last year, even though he's getting the touches. So I don't think those red zone touches are going anywhere. You know, I think the biggest knock against them is just that offense in general. I mean, they have a terrible game script. They're going to be passing the ball a lot, which is why I like Gardner Minshew. And I do think they're going to involve Chris Thompson quite a bit, especially if Jay Gruden gets to stick around, depending on whatever else comes out. But I mean, I do like that offense. And I think Chris Thompson will be a productive pass catching back, which will take away some of Leonard Fournette's targets, but I think he'll make up for it with touchdowns. So I think 14 is a pretty reasonable spot for him. I think he's a safe top 15 back, which might seem kind of crazy to say, but once again, it's one of those. Chris Thompson will take some passing volume, but am I scared of Chris Thompson eating into his overall production, or even Raquel Armstead? Not really. So he's the man there, and I think he'll continue to be a top 15 back.
All right, Apex.
All right. Well, he did have the 3 touchdowns. I wanted to just start on that because I feel like that's going to go up. You know, that's probably one of the most volatile things in fantasy. You know, we've seen Kamara have like 18 touchdowns and then the next year have 6, and guys kind of go up and down. So touchdowns are hard to predict. It's hard to say, they're going to be in the same kind of situation and get the same or more or less. But for this offense, I feel like he's going to get more. I feel like, if they come in and have Gardner Minshew as their quarterback in year 2 and give him a chance to really take over and Chark was, a really good fantasy darling last season and really took that next step as being a, good receiver in the NFL. So they brought in Chris Thompson. He's probably going to take some of the passing work, as we've mentioned. But again, with him, as we've talked about with some of these other running backs, the running backs are probably the position that gets hurt the most, and Chris Thompson's no exception to that. He seems to be hurt himself over the past couple of seasons, and if not, then he'd be kind of an asset that's likely starting somewhere or getting more involved than what he is probably going to get here in Jacksonville. So for that reason, it's I don't expect him to take a ton. He's probably going to cut into its receptions and targets a little bit, but you're talking about how their defense is bad and their offense is bad, and they have the 4th worst game script, and that's what contributed to Fournette having this outlier at the reception totals that he had in 2019 because of their defense, and their offense was so bad that they had to throw 50 plus times a game to catch up. So if they're similar on the defensive side, they can't really slow guys down, to slow other teams down, and leave their offense in the same situation. We could be seeing Fournette repeat in these kind of numbers, and if that's the case, then he's a great value at this point. And I like him at this spot at 14. He's probably the last in the tier of like 2 or 3 tiered running backs for me. That after this, there's a clear step down in terms of injury risk and usage risk and things like that. So I really like targeting Fournette in the third round, as Doc said. He could be your second running back or your flex running back. And if you do go two receivers or maybe a receiver and Kelsey or somebody like that, he's one that I'm confident in as your first running back. So I really like Fournette, and like I said, he's the last in the tier of these top running backs that I'd like to get.
Yeah, I just have to quickly say it's insanity too. I was looking at his red zone touches. He had 54 red zone touches and 3 touchdowns. I mean, I've never seen something like that in my life. 54.
54, and still was fourth most there. So three other. These are all running backs. Was the fourth most, or he was the fourth most in the league?
Running backs.
Running backs. So 3 other running backs touched the ball in the red zone even more. I do like Fournette. I like him a lot. This is like the one common theme that we're seeing in this group of running backs. For the most part, I mean, there's a couple sprinkled in that they are really the bell cow, like Gurley are. Most of these guys are, maybe it's not a 50-50 split, but it is like a 60-40, 70-30 split that they're going to be splitting with other guys on their team, as opposed to next week's episode where 8 out of the 10 guys that we're going to be talking about next week are the bell cow, with a couple other guys sprinkled in with those other guys. But Fournette is one of those guys that he does have competition behind him. Not anybody threatening his job, but they're going to give the ball to Chris Thompson. They're going to give the ball to Raquel Armstead. Fournette actually played a full season last year, so and I'm glad that neither of you's brought up injury in the past, because that's super played out with him. He is he's just a hard running back. He's like he runs the ball just as hard as Derrick Henry runs the ball, and he does get banged up a little bit, but it's not something that lingers with him. Him and Yannick also expressed their disinterest in the Jaguars too. So I mean, this could very well be Fournette's last year in Jacksonville, and if that's the case, I mean, they're just going to run him into the ground and then just say, "Here, go find another team." So I mean, we could see him have one of his best seasons ever, just because of that. Just him just getting overloaded with not having any weapons on that team, and they might be going a different route after this season. Coming in at lucky number 13, we got Austin Eckler, now the new number 1 there in LA for the Chargers. Not as much. He's got some competition behind him too, but I think that he's going to be the number 1 guy in LA for the whole season. I mean, I think we all like a little bit of Justin Jackson. We all like a little bit of why do I always blink on his
Josh
name?
Kelly?
Yes, Josh Kelly. Jesus, I think I've done that before too. It's one of those names that you just forget. Just a basic name. I think he's a spy. But yeah, I mean, we all like them to kind of come in as far as the running game goes. But Eckler is their passing back, but he played 8 or so games for them without Melvin Gordon last year, and he was a pretty solid running back there. So he could definitely handle the load. And we'll start here with you, Apex.
All right. Well, I like Eckler here. He's nicknamed Awesome Eckler for a reason. He was like shot out of a cannon last year with Melvin Gordon trying to hold out. He came in and he definitely proved that he can handle this type of load, and he can be involved all over the place. And he was just awesome for you out of the gate. And it probably is what contributed to Melvin Gordon kind of getting back into it and saying, maybe I am not worth this much. Who knows? That remains to be seen. But Eckler is awesome. I really like him at this spot. I think this is a good ranking. I do really like him, but I probably would take some of these other guys ahead of him. So him coming in at 13th here, I've seen him kind of last into the third round sometimes, but for the most part, he goes in the end of the second. So if you're taking him, you already got a really good back with McCaffrey or Barkley or Zeke or somebody like that. Or you're in the 4th spot, you took Michael Thomas, and then you get a really nice PPR back, and Eckler is your number 1. So I like him. We're going to talk about how, maybe Justin Jackson or Josh Kelly is going to take this or going to take that. But I just think, Eckler has proven over the last couple of years that he's kind of been this lower level player that has put in the work and rises to the occasion. He was just kind of thrust into number 1 roles last year, and he did awesome with it. He was just like, it was McCaffrey and then it was Eckler. So if you started with those two guys, you were kicking butt in your fantasy league. And I expect some more of the same from from Eckler. I just feel, they have Tyrod now. Tyrod's gonna kind of be trying to find his niche in this offense. Find his number one with Allen, and he's got Henry there as the tight end, and Eckler out of the backfield. So I feel like those are going to be his top three targets. So I feel like he's going to get a lot of passing work. He may not be a goal line back as the typical one that we would want. So maybe that's the area that he's going to lose some touches. But they're going to get this guy involved. He can line up anywhere. He can line up at receiver. I haven't seen them put him at tight end, but he could probably do that too. So I really like Eckler. It's just he's a really good value here at the end of the second round, in my opinion.
Doc?
Well, I mean, just from a fan standpoint, I mean, I love these little running backs on a side note. I mean, he reminds me so much of Danny Woodhead, and Danny Woodhead used to be one of my favorite players. I just loved watching Danny Woodhead, and he was such an underrated fantasy asset for a number of years. So, and I think that's going to happen to Austin Eckler. I mean, this is a guy, he finished fourth last season among all PPR backs, fourth. And I mean, I feel like people are in denial over that. There's a lot of people in the Twitter fantasy community that hate Eckler. And honestly, I mean, I look at a lot of I just can't come up with a reason for why you would hate Eckler. I mean, Melvin Gordon's gone, so he's not going to have any reduction in targets. I mean, the only reason you could say is Tyrod, but with the routes that Austin Eckler runs, this isn't a guy you really dump it off to, as Apex kind of alluded to. He lines up all over the field. He's in the slot. They design plays for Austin Eckler. This isn't, oh crap, I'm in trouble, I'm going to dump it off to Austin Eckler. This is Austin Eckler is the focal point of this offense. And I think people kind of take that for granted. He's their most explosive player. As much as he's not their best, Keenan Allen's one of the best route runners, and I'm not saying I don't know. I mean, you could argue he's more valuable than Keenan Allen is to that offense. Austin Eckler is the only player on that team that any time he touches the ball, he can take it to the house. And it's really evidenced by he had 11 touchdowns last year. I mean, that's impressive. He didn't have really any goal line work. Melvin Gordon took all the goal line carries, and he still had 11 total touchdowns. So, I mean, that's really, really impressive. And when you look at all of his metrics, I mean, they're just so impressive. Number one in yards per touch, number one in production premium, which is how they measure the efficiency of a running back. So he's ranked number one. And one of the biggest things for me, too, is his opportunity share, so his snaps. He was only 33rd in the league in terms of his snap percentage for a running back. And I mean, that's really low. So to only be on the field and be the 33rd most productive running back in terms of how often you're on the field, but finish as the fourth PPR running back, I mean, that's just not something you see very often. And he had his big games last year, but I mean, he was super consistent as well. I mean, he only fell out of the top 24 running backs twice the entire season. So very consistently you were getting an RB2 at worst. So I love Austin Eckler. I had him at 13. I struggled to put him higher, and Apex kind of said this as well. You have a lot of big names that are coming up in our top 10, and it makes it hard to rank them above these guys who are, they get the touchdown volume, they have receiving volume, and it makes him really hard. As much as I want to put Austin Eckler in my top 10, and it wouldn't surprise me if he finished in the top 10, but you start to get these alpha running backs, and it makes it challenging to rank them higher.
Yeah, and kind of just going off what you guys said, we saw it last year at the beginning of the season. He, when Melvin Gordon wasn't in the lineup, he was excellent. He was an excellent back. He wasn't really, not that he wasn't great in the running game. He just, most of his work came in the passing game. He does offer some stability in the running game, though. It's not like he's a terrible running back. He's good rushing the ball, but he's deadly receiving the ball. A couple things that do benefit him is, and neither of you's brought it up, I'm surprised, is that defense. That defense is going to be top 5, top 10 in the league, so that's gonna keep them in games, and also keep them. I mean, if they have a lead, they're going to be running the ball, and it's going to be Austin Eckler and a mixture of Justin Jackson and Josh Kelly back there. So he's going to get some running yards there, and then B, Tyrod Taylor. As much as going from Phillip Rivers to Tyrod Taylor is a downgrade, I guess you can say. Phillip Rivers, he tends to lock on one receiver, and he also tends to just chuck the ball deep. Tyrod is going to come in there. He doesn't have a strong arm, and he's safe with the football. So he's going to come in there, and he's going to hit those short routes. He's going to hit the short routes to Eckler. He's going to hit the short routes to Hunter Henry. He's going to hit the short routes to Keenan Allen because he's like Doc said, he's one of the better route runners. So just coming across the middle. You're going to get a lot of PPR points from Austin Eckler. You're going to get a lot of stability from him because he's just going to spread the ball around. You're not going to get a lot of 200, 250 plus yard passing games from Tyrod and throw him for 4 touchdowns, but you're going to get some efficiency from him, and he's going to use his weapons because that's what he does, and he doesn't turn the ball over. Next up, we got Aaron Jones, who just had 1 million touchdowns last year. We are starting now with, I think it's Doc for this one.
Yeah, I lost track too, but yeah, so Aaron Jones last season, everybody is well aware of the season that he had last year. He was the number 2 PPR back. This year, he's the 13th running back off the board, 15th overall. I'm probably in the minority here, but I'm not overly worried about A.J. Dillon or Jamal Williams. It's one of those where people get too caught up in draft picks sometimes, in my opinion. Aaron Jones is the best running back on that team. I mean, he is far and above more talented than A.J. Dillon. And that's not to say A.J. Dillon won't be involved in the future. To me, it was more signaling that after Aaron Jones is a free agent this offseason, they're going to move on to most likely A.J. Dillon and a combination of Jamal Williams or whoever else they acquire. But, I mean, for this season, Aaron Jones is still the man, in my opinion. He was on the field a ton last year. He got the goal line work. He was more involved out of the backfield than people give him credit for. He had 49 receptions last year. He ran guys over. He was very efficient with his carries. The Packers, surprisingly, their run blocking was pretty poor last year, so that just speaks to how talented and how great of a season Aaron Jones has. But, I mean, this is another thing I usually talk about as well is the offensive scheme. This is a very balanced team. People think of the Packers of the past and Aaron Rodgers chucking the ball all around, but this is a very balanced team now. Matt LaFleur is going to have a balanced approach. Aaron Jones is going to get his carries, and I think he's going to be a top 10 running back again. And a lot of people say he's not going to score 19 touchdowns again. I mean, I'd agree with that. That's probably unreasonable, but he's still going to be the goal line guy primarily. So even if he gets 12 touchdowns, he's still a top 15 running back. So I think I like where he's going right now. I've taken him as my second running back a few times, and I expect them to still be heavily involved this year.
All right, Apex, what do you think about Aaron Jones?
Well, I'm glad that you have the confidence in him, Doc, because I own him in a dynasty league, and I'm a little bit worried about his usage with them bringing in Dillon and Matt LaFleur coming out and saying that he wants to have these multiple backs kind of going at the same time. So I've been a little hesitant to really dive into Aaron Jones again, and it kind of. It sucks for me because he literally won me the championship, the game against the Vikings where he just exploded. It was like that final 50-yard touchdown run. It won me a championship. So I'm really, in love with Jones and what he was able to do on the field, and just have kind of had that worry in my mind that LaFleur is just going to say, oh, we have an awesome running back, let's add another, so it was a little head scratching that they didn't address some of the other needs on their team. But over the last couple of weeks, I've kind of come to terms with we need some depth, and maybe LaFleur is just kind of getting another back to handle an injury if one were to happen. So I've rised on Jones a little bit. And he was awesome last year, and it was just great. I mean, you don't finish number 2 and just not be awesome for fantasy. And I have him ranked number 10, so I have him a little bit higher. I'm willing to take him a little bit, above some of these other guys that are, in the same kind of boat that he is. But, I just he's going to get the same kind of work. I mean, we touched on it. You said, Doc, that the very balanced offense. And that isn't the kind of Rodgers that we've been used to seeing, and the offenses that he's run. So, they made a lot of good improvements on the defense last year, and I feel like that's what's helped mostly contribute to them being able to be a balanced team. And so I'm hopeful that they're gonna kind of do that again, get after the quarterback with some of their young pass rushers and be able to control the ball to use Aaron Jones. So him coming in here at this spot is pretty nice. He's a second round running back. So you're going to make the decision over Jones or Eckler or some of these other guys that we're going to be getting to in a little bit. And if we're probably going to see a regression in the touchdowns, he's not going to get the same amount that he did last year because I talked about it earlier. It can go up and down. So we saw, I'll bring it up again. Kamara had these kind of touchdown totals and then they plummeted to 6. So I kind of see him going in the middle there. I got him at about 14 or 15. So if he can get that and he can sustain the yardage and the carries and total touches that he had last year, I think he's going to be a really good back yet again for you this year.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that his touchdown regression or touchdowns are going to regress. They're definitely going to go down. But again, they really didn't. The draft, free agency, they didn't bring in anybody else on this offense to kind of just take any targets, take any balls away from either him or Devontae Adams. So he's the number 2 target on this team. Sternberger's going to get a little bit of a jump. Whoever is the wide receiver 2, whether it be Lazard, Funches, Valdez-Scantling, any of them, they're going to get their catches. But it's going to be Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. And anytime Aaron Rodgers is on the field, defenses have to respect that, and it's just going to open up Aaron Jones even more. They're not just going to. Aaron Rodgers can still run. I know he's over 30 now, with pushing 35, 36. I know he's a couple years older than me, so 35, 36. But he is he's still athletic. He can still chuck the ball like the rest of them. He's going to get the ball to his best targets and his best players, and that's Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. So Aaron Jones is still going to get his work. He's another one of those, like you mentioned, Apex with Eckler. I think this is Aaron Jones. He's a perfect pair-up guy. If you end up getting maybe he might not fall as far as Eckler, to the late second, to where you could pair him up with Barkley or McCaffrey. But if you're in the middle of the first round and you take your Michael Thomas or you take your Derrick Henry or somebody like that, then you could pair him up with Aaron Jones, and that's a good 1-2 punch right there. Moving on to our last one that we're going to talk about today. Good timing so far. We're a little bit over an hour, so not bad. We got Kenyon Drake, the newest, well, not new. I mean, he was new. He was there last year, but now the number 1 running back in Arizona. High-powered offense. We're gonna see a lot of fireworks from that team this year. Had an excellent second half last year. Doc's probably going to talk about that, but we're going to start here with you, Apex, first. What's your thoughts on Kenyon Drake there?
All right, well, I'll let the doc stay a little more positive with Drake because I am kind of looking over this list, and I just feel like for what we talked about Aaron Jones, what he did last year, I'm probably taking Aaron Jones over Drake. I'm probably taking some of these other backs over him. Eckler, probably not Eckler, but for Drake, it's just he came in hot last year. He was the new guy, they traded for him around week 8 or 9, and he came in and just basically took over and supplanted David Johnson, and that's what led to his trade. So he's going to have to keep that pace up for this year to be able to warrant this draft position, in my opinion. He comes in as our 11th ranked running back, and I've seen him go in the first round. I've seen people take him over Henry, as crazy as it may seem. But on the flip side, he's also lasted towards the middle of the second round. So he's kind of in that range. A lot of people are either, they kind of ebb and flow with him, take him in mid-second, or they really believe in him and they're going to take him in the first. For me, I'm a little bit more towards the first part of that. I would feel comfortable with him as my second, but I don't think I'm willing to take him as my first. I feel like, like I said, he's going to have to repeat basically his second half to be able to crack into the top 10 and be a first round pick for me. And with adding DeAndre Hopkins, I don't know if that's going to be available for him to be able to do that this year. I think that's going to take away a lot of the passing work. and you know, if their defense doesn't improve and doesn't stop other teams, I feel like they're going to be in some negative game scripts pretty often. That's going to kind of get him away from running the ball a lot. So it goes to be said that if he's going to continue this pace that he set forth last season, at the back half of last season, he could definitely return value here. But for me, it's just he carries a little bit of risk that I'm probably not taking him as my first, and be comfortable with him as my second. But I'd probably look to some of these other backs before I selected Drake.
All right, Doc.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of on the fence about Drake. I really like Drake, and I'm glad that he finally got out of Miami, but you kind of mentioned it. His ADP right now is actually the 8th running back off the board, and I've seen him pretty frequently go, and it's actually 11th overall. So I've actually pretty frequently seen him go towards the end of the first round, if not right at the turn there. Yeah, and I mean, I just feel like that's too high for him. When you look at where he finished during those 8 games, and that 8 game stretch, don't get me wrong, it's incredible, but he was the 7th best running back during that stretch. So as incredible as he was, you're paying for that second half. And, I don't like paying for a player at their peak. I'm looking for upside and value. And can I see him beating his second half of last year? I mean, I really can't, honestly. In those 8 games, he had 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. So for a whole year, having Kenyon Drake, or me sitting here and saying I project him out for 1,600 yards and 16 touchdowns, I mean, I'm not comfortable sitting here and saying that. So I really feel like you are paying for his peak value. As much as I think that he can be a top 10, 11, 12 in that range running back, I have a problem paying for him as the 8th, 9th, 10th guy off the board, just because I think he's going to have a huge season. I do really like that offense for running backs in general. When you think about the way that they operate, it makes a lot of sense when you look at the stats too. I mean, they spread the ball around. This is a spread offense, which means there's less defenders in the box. And that's when Kenyon Drake had a lot of his success. You have all the wide receivers out wide, and that leaves a lot of open room for him up the middle. So I do like this offense overall for running backs. Jerry and I have talked about this before. This is an offensive line that's very underrated. They keep improving. I think it could be probably right around top 8 unit this year. And I think given even more time and more seasoning, they could be a top 5 unit. So there's a lot to like with Kenyon Drake, but once again, I don't really like his ADP right now, and I think it's an overpay.
All right. Can we all just applaud him for getting out of Adam Gase's system? I know Gase wasn't there last year, but for the first 3 years of his career, he was in that hellhole. That is Adam Gase's system. So I think he's rejuvenated from it. I think he's going to be seeing him for a full year in Arizona, and like you already said, Doc, before you kicked it over to me, we're very excited about that offense. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, but there really is only Kenyon Drake there with a little sprinkles of with Chase Edmonds, and a little bit of Eno Benjamin too. But it's going to be the Kenyon Drake show, and then he's another guy that you want to pair him up with one of these other top end guys like a Christian McCaffrey or a Saquon Barkley, but he's probably not going to fall that far. So you're probably looking at like the end of the first round and a couple guys that we haven't talked about yet, but we're going to talk about next week. Spoiler alert, sorry to bring it up, but like kind of like last year when we were looking at a Joe Mixon and James Conner combination, you could be looking at like a Miles Sanders Kenyon Drake combination or a Josh Jacobs Kenyon Drake combination. That's a great 1-2 punch to start off your fantasy team with at the end of the first and second round. So just based on what he did last year, how Kingsbury used him, and just that offense that I think, I mean, that NFC West has some solid running backs in it now, with the exception of sorry, no offense, Jordan, the Rams. But
wow, thanks.
But yeah,
49ers, come on.
Well, I mean, they're a running team, so you got anybody that's back there is going to be all right. But Arizona's going to be a fun team to watch overall, and I think Kenyon Drake is going to be just fine. Is his ADP a little too high for me? Yeah, but if I'm at the 11, 12 spot in PPR league, or regardless of whatever kind of league it is, 11, 12 spot, and Drake's there, Sanders, Jacobs, Chubb is all there. I might pair Drake up with one of those three and have a nice 1-2 punch there.
Yep.
All right, so that's going to do it for today's episode. We went through 20 to 11. So next week we got the top 10. I kind of already mentioned a couple names we're going to talk about, but if you haven't heard any of the names, if you haven't heard a name yet, between 30 to 11, they're probably on next week's episode. You can guess that Christian McCaffrey's on there. We got Reggie Bonifin we're going to talk about next week. Yeah, so
Tony Pollard.
Yeah, Tony Pollard, all those guys. We got who else? We got Gio Bernard. I think we're going to talk about him a little bit next week. So we got some big names next week. But just going over the 10 that we talked about today. Jonathan Taylor kicked us off today at number 20. David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, Chris Carson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Leonard Fournette, Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, and finally Kenyon Drake. So solid group of RB2s there, low end or high end RB1s, or low end RB1s, high end RB2s. So we'll see you guys next week. And actually, before we close it out, let's do a little bit of advertising here. Doc, why don't you let us know what's going on the page and what we got going on?
Yeah, so we're starting to ramp up things for the NFL season. We have our team mini series that we've been releasing 6 days a week, and essentially what we're doing is we're breaking down the roster of every single NFL team. So if it was the Cardinals, we're going over Kyler Murray, Kenyon Drake, all of their wide receivers, tight ends, kickers, defenses, IDPs. So we're really throwing everything in one episode. So no matter what kind of format you play in, it's very informative, and we really go into a lot of detail. So I recommend you check that out. We also have a ton of articles coming out every day. We're releasing about 16 NFL articles a week. So you can check that out on our website, thefantasymafia.com. And as always, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and you get a notification anytime we put a video up. So we appreciate that. And if you don't already, I'll also mention the Fantasy Hotspot. We just passed over 500 members. We're trying to get to our next plateau of 1,000 here. So make sure you join that, invite your friends, and start the conversation.
Yeah, a little bit over a month took us to get to 500 members. But we just gave away a Trevor Lawrence jersey for reaching 500. And so, I mean, we have different contests going on. We run Razes pretty much every other day. You actually brought up, what do we do? We're at 21 for the month of July. Is that what you said?
Yeah, we've done 21.
21 Razes for the month of July, which is insane. I mean, we've had Damian Williams jersey came out of a mystery box. We've had Amari Cooper jersey come out of a mystery box. Oh. Thurman Thomas came out of a mystery box. So just high-end players coming out of these boxes. And then we got our hands, just outside of the mystery boxes, we got our hands on a Keenan Allen. We got a Cortland Sutton. We got some college jerseys like Jerry Jeudy, J.K. Dobbins, which was actually won today. So a lot of good stuff there. Apex, what are you working on? Any articles you get coming out? And also, you also do some of the UFC stuff, so anything coming out soon for that?
I believe it just got posted onto our website, but I did a Mahomes article, and as well as I have a Miles Sanders article. So, we're going to get into him in the next running back episode. But as far as the UFC, the next event is actually this Saturday. It's going to be their last one on Fight Island. It's going to be 15 fights on this card, so it's really good. Usually available on ESPN Plus. So if you got kids, you probably got the ESPN and the Disney and the Hulu type of stuff or whatever. So if not, it's a really good buy. They got a lot of cool stuff on there. So definitely the number one place to watch the fights. And we'll catch you next time.
All right, so there you have it. That's the second episode of the RBs that we got going on. Next week we're going to do the top 10. When this episode posts, a little bit after, I think within a couple days after, the MLB season is finally kicking off. So that's going to be fun to watch. I mean, that's another sport that's going on right now. So yeah, I mean, if you're missing some sports, even if it's not football, if you're missing sports, tune into the MLB, and we got some fantasy advice. Doc and Rydog are excellent with the MLB. They're in about 336,000 leagues a year, so let's ask them for questions there, and then when the real sports start, we'll talk about those too. But the MLB, I guess, is first. So until next time, we'll see you guys.